I'm sorry. This is not at all, not even close to meeting the moment of our planetary inferno. And to the neoliberals are going to say, well, what do you want, Joe Manchin? This is why I was critical of Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, all corrupt. The progressives, the squad, Pramila Jayapal, Khanna, from day one. Because it is clear Joe Manchin could have been shamed because he was just shamed into agreeing to this. It is clear Joe Manchin could have been pressured to say yes to a lot more than this a year ago if Biden would have done the things that I've been saying and other people were saying. His daughter committed crimes, jacking up the prices of EpiPen when she was the head of a pharmaceutical company. You have clearly he has enriched himself from a coal plant, and there's some things you could have looked at in terms of him price fixing and hiking up prices for electricity in West Virginia, hiking up the price of electricity for constituents in West Virginia to enrich his coal plant. They could have done a lot more to force Manchin's hand. And now we don't even know if we're going to get this piece of rump roast because Cinema, another corrupt ghoul, is asking for changes. She doesn't want the tax hikes on wealthy people. Even though these tax hikes on wealthy people, good luck. You think Amazon, they're going to force Amazon to pay $15 billion minimum? What's the 15% corporate tax? Think they're going to force Walmart 15% corporate tax? McDonald's? I'll believe it when I see it. But I want to focus also on Khanna because he's somehow like cheering this as somehow like a major achievement. Here we go. This is from Politico. Normally, just as Senate Dems begin to unite the final knots presented by the parliamentarian caucus holdouts, the parliamentarian, progressives in the House would start making noises about why they can't support the bill. But so far, those voices have been muted. On Wednesday, we talked to Congressman Khanna about why Democrats in the House, and especially progressives, this time seem ready to swallow whatever is sent over. The left catches bipartisan fever. The CHIPS bill and the reconciliation deal are about showing that the progressives can build a governing coalition and that it's not just aspiration, that it's actually possible to compromise to get things done. Yeah, to get crumbs done, to get crap done, to not meet the moment, to offer a few Band-Aids to a gunshot wound. If that's what Khanna thinks is going to help progressives in America get what they want, Khanna added, quote, the knock on progressives is we put out these ideas, but what are we doing to govern? What are we getting done? Here on CHIPS, we compromised. We didn't lose a single progressive vote. Apparently, Khanna is also the progressive Manchin whisperer. Manchin called Khanna on New Year's Day, not long after Manchin killed Build Back Better. Khanna made him a promise. I will assure you that if you come up with something reasonable, that we could get the environmental groups behind it and we could get the progressives behind it. He told Manchin that as long as there was a, quote, massive climate spending in the bill, there was lots of rooms for other things progressives detested. Manchin outlined much of what ended up in the recent deal with Schumer. He said, Khanna recalled, I want deficit reduction. I want to make sure that we have some permitting reform, i.e. giving fossil fuel companies whatever they want quickly. I want to make sure that there's going to be some things for fossil. Khanna told him, if you could get the massive climate portion in, it will be 10-1 in terms of the positive impact. And I think you will be seen as helping make history, as having ushered in from the state of West Virginia the most aggressive climate legislation in the history of the world. What Roe learned about Joe, Khanna said he learned 3 things about Manchin, the most studied man in Washington. He's a relationship person. He'll call you up and he wants to just chat for a half hour. I think that's underestimated. You have to build trust and rapport with him to engage. While many Senate Dems and top White House officials have cursed Manchin for being unreasonable and inscrutable through the long negotiations, Khanna argued he was consistent. He's been pretty clear from my perspective in the year I've dealt with him about what he wants. You may not like what he wants. I don't like certain things he wants, but I've never found that he's not clear about it. It's not like he hasn't said what he's for and what he's against. All right, you get the point. It's just pathetic. This is, if Khanna and the media is framing it this way, from what I could tell, the environmental groups are swallowing it. If Khanna thinks this is historic, then he could, write a book about it, but we'll all be dead before we could read it. It's, to be clear, it's technically better than nothing, but you can't take better than nothing as a victory when the situation is a disaster and a catastrophe. Like, tax credits and incentives are not immediate forced action. We need to immediately, frankly, force the shift to clean and renewable, wind, solar. We need to immediately not give tax incentives, just throw money at this. I mean, honestly, the amount of money we've given to Ukraine, to the military budget, times that, times 10. I think it was, frankly, a conservative estimate when AOC said we need about $10 trillion for this. $380 billion and most of its tax incentives. By the way, for this, they gave Manchin the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which I just did a video on the other day, which is a major, major disastrous, dangerous pipeline that is a natural gas pipeline. It is going under the steepest slopes in America, the Appalachian Trail. And I covered this years ago when I was in Virginia. If and when it explodes, it has a blast radius of 2 miles underneath homes that are on mountains on the Appalachian Trail. Just the price of doing business. Let's hear what Bernie has to say about this. Granted, he's not going to block it. He's going to vote for it. But let's just hear what Bernie Sanders had to say about this deal.
Does this reconciliation bill address their needs? Does it raise the minimum wage to a living wage? Or do we continue to allow so many workers to try to get by on 10, 12, 13 bucks an hour? Does this bill make it easier for workers who want to join a union to be able to do so, or they continue to be attacked by their employers, making it hard to form a union? No, this bill does nothing to address that reality. Mr. President, at a time when, tragically, this country has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, does this bill extend the $300 a month per child tax credit that was so important to millions of families last year? Does it address that issue? Does it say that maybe there is something wrong when millions of children in this country are dealing with hunger and with other basic human needs? No, not a word in this bill addresses that. Mr. President, in my state of Vermont and around this country, families are paying on average about $15,000 a year for child care, if they are lucky enough to find a slot. $15,000 a year. It's 1/3 of the salary of a family making $45,000. I don't know how people can afford child care. And meanwhile, child care workers earn horrifically low wages and poor benefits. At a time when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, does this bill address the dysfunctionality of our child care system? No, not a word. And again, this is a reconciliation bill where we only need 50 votes to make these changes. Mr. President, at a time when over 70 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured, when we spend twice as much per capita on health care as the people of almost any other major country, while insurance companies make tens and tens of billions of dollars a year in profit, when 60 million people a year die because they can't afford to get to a doctor when they are sick because they're uninsured or underinsured, does this bill do anything to help us create a rational, cost-effective health care system which guarantees health care for all as a human right, something that every other major country on earth does. No, the bill does nothing to address the extraordinary health care crisis that we face. Mr. President, at a time when 45 million Americans are struggling to pay student debt, and when hundreds of thousands of bright young people every year are unable to fulfill their dreams, unable to get a higher education because they cannot afford the high cost of higher education in this country, does this bill do anything to make it easier for young people to get a higher education? No, guess not. Doesn't do a thing. Doesn't do a thing on student debt.
Well, he's right. He's right. But he's going to vote for it. He's going to vote for it when, in my view, I'd block it. He would take a lot of heat. He'd probably be blamed if Democrats lose the Senate. But I think you got to take a stand at some point. And Bernie Sanders, he ran 2 presidential campaigns. He knows that this is a joke in terms of climate. He knows that this is a Band-Aid to a gunshot wound. So why can't he carry as big of a stick as Manchin or Sinema? But the time to actually pressure and campaign and activate the grassroots energy and activate the base was a year ago if we were going to get something real, not 3 months before the midterm elections where we're going to have to accept a piece of rump roast. And to those who say, well, Jordan, that's why you're not a politician. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I understand compromise, but there's a difference between compromise and absolute surrender. They could have pressured Manchin. Bernie, the squad, they should have been in West Virginia. They should have been in Arizona. They should have been holding rallies. They should have been energizing the deflated progressive base, because there's a lot of deflated progressives, including all you watching. People would have came. People would have rallied. They would have gotten people outside Manchin's office, in front of his yacht every day. Camp out if you have to. At his coal plant. But they chose to be diplomatic, to negotiate within Congress. Bernie went over to Biden's, the White House, his friend Joe. And what we got for a planetary inferno is some tax credits. And by the way, just so you know, because they're also declaring victory, history, we are going to lower prescription drug prices. Well, I interviewed Michael Leidy, who is an expert on Medicare for All, one of the biggest advocates for Medicare for All in the United States, a healthcare expert. I said, can you explain to me what this whole lowering prescription drugs? Because that's what the media is saying. This is historic and it's going to lower prescription drugs. Let's see what he had to say.
Well, it means, Jordan, lowering prescription drug prices for people over 65 in Medicare and on a limited basis, that it would cap those individuals' out-of-pocket expenses at $2,000 per year, and would over the next really like 8 years, include a set of drugs that would be limited in terms of price via negotiations with the manufacturers. Those drugs, there would be 10 in 2026, 15 in 27, 15 in 28, and 20 in 2029. So you're talking about a benefit that doesn't go into effect for 4 years. When it does go into effect, it will be limited to a set of drugs that are ranked by cost to Medicare. So they'll say, okay, here are all the drugs. Here's what they cost Medicare. Here are the top, cost drugs for us. We'll choose some of those to begin negotiations. But those drugs have to be beyond their patent at least 7 to 8 years after launch. And that means probably that those drugs that are not that old, when they do launch, will be higher priced. So it has that negative effect as well. But it doesn't apply to folks on private insurance. It obviously benefits people on private drug plans under Medicare, because those are the only drug plans you can get under Medicare, either the purchased ones under Part D or the drug plans that are included in Part C, Medicare Advantage. So there's obviously some assistance to the insurance companies as well. The overall savings is estimated to be about $300 billion. That is a drop in the bucket in the prescription drug market, and it just shows you how much excess revenue and profits exist in that market, because they can do this very limited program and still save hundreds of billions of dollars. But the truth is that it's probably the most limited version of anything that has really been on the table. It's a version of what the House passed, but a little bit more limited than that. And since it doesn't include people on private insurance, it obviously has a limited demographic effect. Finally, it doesn't include insulin, though they expect it to eventually, if there is a deal on prescription drugs, some version of limits on out-of-pocket costs for insulin would be included. However, those out-of-pocket limits are not expected to apply to the uninsured, who have the greatest problem affording insulin.
Historic. Doesn't include insulin. What is it? 15 drugs in 2026, then another 15, then another 20. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.